Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 87 of Buha's Block. On today's episode, we are going to be covering the state of the Lakers, 10 storylines at the 50-game mark. Before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications so you never miss a post-game or trade, any type of live stream from me or a new video on the channel, and make sure you like and comment on this video. And then for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. All right, so let's touch on the Lakers' vitals right now as a team. They are 31-19, which means they are on a 51 win pace this season. They are 4th in the West. They are 9th in offense, 18th in defense, and 13th in net rating. They also have a positive point differential for the first time in over 2 months. So things are trending in the right direction for the Lakers. They've won 11 of 13. They are 9-1 in their last 10 games, and they have won 5 games in a row. So let's get into storyline number 1, which is going to be a question. And is this the craziest stretch in Lakers history? And it's a high bar to clear because there's always some form of drama in Lakerland. Like, it's just the Lakers and drama go together like peanut butter and jelly. And it's just par for the course, right? There's a lot of winning, a lot of championships, a lot of all-time great superstars, a lot of celebrities in the crowd, and the purple and gold colors are iconic, and like all of the great glitz and glamour and success and just greatness that comes with the Lakers. There's always some stuff off the court. It's some form of drama and just narratives and storylines and different things. So I'm going to start things back at January 19th because I think that's when the weirdness kind of started. And then we're going to go all the way to February 10th when Luka is questionable to make his debut against the Jazz. But the way the Lakers have talked about it, the intel behind the scenes seems like it's more likely than not he is going to play on Monday, barring a setback. So we'll see if he makes his debut. Maybe it'll be on Wednesday against the Jazz in Utah. But for now, let's operate under the assumption he is making his debut. So between January 19th and February 10th, about a 3-week timeline, let's go through it. So the Lakers get blown out by the Clippers, and LeBron and JJ each have some post-game comments implying that the group does not have a large margin for error. And I think that there was an implication there just about the quality of the roster and the Lakers not necessarily having the requisite level of talent for this group to truly compete. Then a few days later, ahead of the Lakers-Celtics game, literally like an hour or so before the game starts, AD has an interview with ESPN, and it comes out that he says he wants to play power forward and that he thinks the Lakers need to add a center at the trade deadline. Then we talked to AD after the game, and he doubles down. And he's referencing the 2020 season. He says that he's asked the front office to get him a center every offseason. They're well aware of this, and he just thinks he's better and more effective at power forward. So AD, not LeBron. Typically, it's LeBron who applies the pressure either directly or passively to his front office. This time it was AD. And so that was a bit surprising. Then the Lakers go out and blow out the Celtics. Then they go and beat the Warriors. They have statement wins against 2 of the teams they dislike the most in the league and that the fan base dislikes the most. Then AD dominates the Hornets. His final performance as a Laker, 42 points, 23 rebounds. He has a 40-20. He dominates Mark Williams, which we'll get into in a second. And that's AD's final performance. We didn't know that at the time, but that ends up being it. Then the next game, he gets injured. It's the second night of a back-to-back, third game in 4 nights for LA. He gets injured in the first quarter against the Sixers, goes back to the locker room, does not return ever as a Laker, as grim as that sounds. And then the Lakers get blown out in Philadelphia. Then the Lakers beat the Wizards without AD in rather convincing fashion. And then they beat the Knicks without AD, also in convincing fashion. So the Lakers are playing some of their best basketball this season. They've had multiple double-digit blowout wins. And then just when it seems like this team is about to peak, that they're finally forming an identity on both sides of the ball. And Vando's back. Could have mentioned that somewhere in there. Jarred Vanderbilt finally returns. So like things are rounding into form for the Lakers, but they are approaching the trade deadline. And Saturday night, 9:15 roughly Pacific time, 12:15 a.m. Technically Sunday morning on the East Coast, where we were at MSG. The Luka trade happens, and at first people didn't think it was real. And people thought Shams got hacked, and just could not believe that the Lakers traded Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first-round pick for Luka Doncic, Markieff Morris, and Maxi Kleber. And like it broke the NBA world, it broke the sports world, it broke pop culture. Like it transcended everything, and it was just one of the most shocking trades and could end up being one of the most consequential trades in NBA history. And then you have the Luka presser with Luka and Rob Pelinka, and you have Luka taking the high road, but also making it clear that he's not going to forget what happened. And you kind of tell he was reserved a bit about how he truly felt. Then Rob Pelinka says the Lakers are looking for a center, and that is the goal over the next few days going into the trade deadline. And that was important because, as Rob would later say, that was basically a billboard for opposing teams to reach out to the Lakers. So multiple teams reach out to the Lakers, one of them being Charlotte. And according to Pelinka, they offer up Mark Williams, a guy who the Lakers had been interested in, but did not think was available. And really no one thought what was available. He was not a name that was out there really in the trade ether. So the two sides negotiate, and they come to an agreement in about 36 hours. And all of a sudden, the second big trade out of nowhere for the Lakers, and really the third one, if we go back to the Dorian Finney-Smith trade, is they trade for Mark Williams, and they trade their 2031 unprotected first-round pick and a 2030 pick swap, and Dalton Knecht and Cam Reddish for Mark Williams. So they get Luka, the type of big man that he wants. They show him they're serious about the partnership, that if he tells them, hey, I want a vertical lob threat like I had in Dallas, they go get him one. And they get him one in basically 3 days for what they spoke about it. And then it's a 23-year-old who's on the same timeline, and the health is a concern and the defense is a bit of a concern. But this was a guy that was averaging 20 and 12 over his past 11 games leading into the trade. He'd been playing pretty well. Just played Jokic, had 20, 15, 3 blocks, blocked Jokic, had some good defensive possessions against him. So the Lakers make this trade. They have their starting center. They move Jackson Hayes to the bench. It was a pretty hefty price. It was, according to some that I spoke to around the league, and as some others said, like probably a slight overpay for Mark Williams. But the way the Lakers viewed it was, we have a shot here with Luka and LeBron. We need a center. Let's go get the best center possible we can with our remaining assets. And they felt Mark Williams checked that box. Then they beat the Warriors and the Pacers. So the night of the trade deadline, they beat the Warriors. Then the trade gets announced, and they have the welcome Mark Williams post. And it was kind of weird how it took 24 hours for it to be official, but it becomes official. Then Mark Williams is out for the Saturday matchup with the Pacers, and it's because the trade is still pending. Lakers beat the Pacers without LeBron and still without Luka. And then later that night, about an hour and a half or so after I left, or the game was over, rather, they rescind the trade. And they say that the Hornets did not hold up their end of the bargain. And the implication there was the Hornets did something wrong. And as ESPN reported, and I was able to confirm and do some more digging on, like, Mark Williams failed his physical. And my understanding of the situation was it was some longer term concerns, not necessarily short term stuff. The Lakers did vet him both internally and externally. Internally with their doctor, Dr. Leroy Sims, externally with Dr. Chris Jones out of UCLA. So they did their research and vetted his medical records. They deemed that none of them were that concerning from a long-term perspective in terms of he had obviously had some significant injuries, but they were all one-offs. There was no surgeries, and they felt like they were all relatively fluky. But upon getting him in the building and putting him through further testing, they deemed that longer term, there was some significant risks with different parts of his body. It was not his back, but there were other injuries or longer term concerns. So that whole situation happens, and the Lakers rescind a trade, which is pretty it's a pretty rare thing to happen. It's pretty uncommon. And now February 10th, February 9th is the Super Bowl. February 10th, Luka is, we'll say, likely to make his debut. He still's got some physical hurdles to clear in terms of being officially cleared for the game. We'll see how I assume he'll be a game time decision. Then he'll go through his pregame workout and they will make that call. But what a wild, I mean, I guess technically, 3 weeks exactly in Lakerland, from passive aggressive / direct post-game comments to direct comments to the front office and the organization to go get a setter, to statement wins against rivals, to injuries, to shocking trades, to shocking rescindments, then finally Luka making his debut. Like, it's just been a wild ride over the last 3 weeks. Thankfully, the trade deadline is behind us. The team is the team, and they can still make some moves, which I will talk about a little bit later in the storylines. But just an insane stretch here in Lakers history. And I know there's been some other insane stretches for a number of reasons, but I think this is right up there in terms of just chaos and just shock and a lot of optimism and positive stuff, but then also some stuff that hasn't gone their way. Like, it's been a roller coaster ride, and I can say from covering it, I feel like every time I get a phone notification, I'm just like expecting the best or the worst. Like, it's been really nothing in between. It's been like a bunch of highs, a bunch of lows. It's just it's been, even by Laker standards, like, I can say this is my 5th season covering the Lakers as a beat reporter, and I don't know if I've ever had a 3-week stretch quite like this. I don't think anything is going to top the game 41 mark to the game 50 mark. It's unlike anything I've ever covered in my career. Speaking of Luka, storyline number 2 is the Lakers traded for Luka Doncic, and it was a trade that nobody saw coming. Luka was not known to be on the market. He was not known to be disgruntled. The Mavericks did not shop him around the league to try to get the best package possible. This trade has been such a disaster from the Mavericks side that, one, you had the trade be tweeted out, and the reporter who tweeted it out later said that they thought they were hacked when they got the information of the trade to report on. And then 2, had to quote tweet his initial tweet and say that, no, this is a real thing. Like, yes, this trade actually happened. So you have that reaction of not only him, Shams, but like people around the league, coaches, players, executives, owners, reporters. No one believed it. Obviously fans, like, no one believed it. So you have that. And then you have Dallas try to get out in front of it and start leaking stuff about, well, Luka's weight and conditioning and leadership. And like, it's like, okay, but you guys were 4th at Christmas time when he went out and you dropped to 9th. You guys just made the finals last year. 2 years before that, you made the conference finals. He's put up historical numbers and probably had the best 6.5 season start of any player in the post-millennium outside of LeBron James. And you trade this guy and you don't really maximize the package. And you have to try to do damage control by leaking all these things to try and besmirch his character and just who he is as a player. And you're doing that because you know the reaction is going to be so poor. Then there's been multiple comments from the Mavericks organization or public and anonymous. You had the fans revolting outside of American Airlines Center. They had a casket. There's been chants and signs about Nico Harrison. There's been I mean, frankly, like increased security and fear about what's going to happen to ownership and the front office and even the players. Like it's just been a nightmare. Then on top of it, it was just announced that Anthony Davis is going to miss a few weeks with this abdominal injury that he's been dealing with. He was dealing with before the trade. That's the one he suffered in Philadelphia, and then now re-aggravated it in his first game with the Mavericks. So just like this was supposed to be a win now move for the Mavericks. And unfortunately for them, it's not looking like it is going to lead to a lot of winning, at least in the short term. And then, they're already the 8th seed. We'll see what ends up happening if they can stay above water and remain in the play-in mix with 80 out for what's looking like a month. So just an all-around disaster for the Mavericks. But for the Lakers, it's an incredible trade, a generational trade. Could end up being one of the best trades in NBA history. And just to go through it here. I've talked about this a lot, of course, over the past 8 days, but let's just recap it. So the Lakers get a 25-year-old generational talent out of nowhere. This is a player that has checked basically every box since he's entered the league. He has led a team to the finals. He's led a team to the conference finals. He's put up incredible numbers. He and LeBron are the only two players in NBA history to average 27 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists for their careers. That just shows you what type of company Luka's in and what type of all-around player Luka is. But to keep it going, he's the heir apparent to the throne after LeBron leaves. And really, the heir apparent now, he is taking over now. The Lakers have made it clear like this is his franchise moving forward, and they're going to try to build things around him and to his liking. And that's just been, especially going back to the Mark Williams trade. Remember, LeBron had been asking for another star ball handler for multiple years. The Lakers didn't go get that player. And AD had been asking for a center for years, and the Lakers didn't go get that player. But when Luka asked for Mark Williams or that type of player, he gets him within 3 days. So that just shows you how committed the Lakers are and how much they're trying to get this to work, get him to feel comfortable, and ultimately get him to sign an extension either this summer or next summer. And in the short term, the Lakers increased their ceiling because Luka is a better player than Anthony Davis. But they also position themselves better in the long term as they now have the future face of the franchise, a 25-year-old star. He will be turning 26 soon, but still a star not yet in his prime who can usher in the next era of Lakers basketball and also be an attractive potential teammate for star free agents in 2026 or 2027 for the next Lakers star pairing. Having Luka and cap space is going to be attractive to a lot of potential stars. And I've covered how highly I think of Luka before the trade. I had already said on a stream, I was asked, I think my top 5 or top 10 players in the league. I said Luka, I had him at number 2. Like that was no change in that because he's a Laker now. Like that, I felt Luka was the second best player in the league behind Nikola Jokic, and I voted for him to be an all-star starter. I have a vote this year, and again, that was also before the trade when the votes had to be submitted. So I felt that, despite him missing some games, that I voted for him and Shea as the West backcourt. And I was just like, he's just so much better than whoever else you want to put in the backcourt next to Shea, that I was like, I'll still vote for Luka, even if he has missed some games. So I'm very high on Luka. And so some more relevant information with him. He is 3rd in the regular season in points per game all time, behind just Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain. And he is 2nd in the postseason in points per game all time, behind just Michael Jordan. So like being in the 27-7-7 club with LeBron, he is also in the scoring club with MJ and Wilt. And he is one of only 5 players in the NBA currently to have made 5 All-NBA first teams, joining LeBron, KD, James Harden, and Giannis. And all 4 of those guys are 30 or above. Luka's currently 25, so you got a 5-year age gap there. And he has more All-NBA first teams than Steph Curry and Nikola Jokic and Kawhi Leonard. So that just shows you how, like, the start of his career, 5 straight, 5 of 7, will probably not make All-NBA first team this year because of the injuries and maybe because of the trade, but it is still, again, I think he's the second best player in the league right now. And I also think an underrated element of all this is going to be the revenge tour from Luka Doncic. He already has beef with like half of the stars and rival teams in the league. The Lakers are going to have to inherit that beef, but he has been disparaged by the Mavericks publicly and anonymously. They have thrown him under the bus for his defense, his weight, his conditioning, his leadership, and really just questioning, can we win with this guy as our best player? They cost them over $100 million because of trading him when he was eligible for the Supermax extension. So this is a guy who has lived off of conflict and motivation. He is always looking for slights. He is cut from the Kobe and Jordan cloth. And I think he's going to be a demon for the rest of the season. I think we're going to have quite the Luka revenge tour. And then storyline number 3 for me is going to be the Mark Williams rescinded trade and the fallout from it. Of course, had the Mark Williams trade gone through and beneficial, I would be talking about Mark Williams, this storyline and how he fits and whatnot. But now we got to talk about what this means that this trade got rescinded and where the Lakers go from here. So as I said, in the latest surprise of the Lakers trade cycle, the Williams trade gets rescinded because he fails the physical. And as I also said, for a player to fail a physical and for a team to take back the trade, it is a really big deal, especially in this scenario when it was already past the trade deadline, because had this been ahead of the trade deadline, the two sides could have amended the deal and the Lakers could have gone to the Hornets and said, hey, we found these red flags in the physical. We are considering rescinding the trade, but if you are willing to if you're willing to do an amendment and put a protection on the first round pick or pull out one of the swaps or some type of concession on the Charlotte side, they could have amended the trade and upheld it in the new version. But because it was the physicals took place after the trade deadline, they were not able to amend the trade. And it basically was presented to the Lakers as, you can either accept it as is and take on the risk of whatever you found in the physical, or you can rescind it and cancel the trade, but there can be no renegotiating with the trade. And obviously the trade deadline is passed, so you cannot go back and make another trade. So the Lakers were put in a tough position, but ultimately they felt like they could not make this deal based on what they saw with the physical. So the question becomes, now what? And for the Lakers, they have to get another center. Right now, the only healthy center on the roster is Jackson Hayes. You could argue Markieff Morris is a center, but I don't think he's a rotation level player right now. And, Christian Wood's out, Maxi Kleber's out. And you got the two-way guys, Christian Koloko and Trey Jemison. But one limitation with those guys is they can only be activated for 50 games in the regular season, and they cannot play in the playoffs. So the Lakers are going to run into some challenges there over the final 32 games. And then even if Koloko or Jemison plays well and deserves a rotation spot, those guys cannot play in the playoffs. So the Lakers are basically, as constructed, banking on Maxi Kleber or Christian Wood returning from injury, even though Kleber's out until at least early April. Christian Wood, there's been no updates on him for, I would say, go to like 2 months almost. And so I would not be putting my eggs in that basket. And so the Lakers are in a predicament here where Jackson Hayes has played well recently, but I think is clearly more of a backup caliber center than a starting 24 to 28 minute a night center. I think the Lakers have benefited from some recent matchups that have not really tested Jackson in the way that some of the best teams will test him, or some of the best big men in particular will test him. And like even against the Knicks, they often put him on Josh Hart away from the ball and had him sag off Josh Hart to help on drives, to help double Karl Anthony Towns. Rui was taking on that matchup. DFS was taking on that matchup. So I think he fared well against the Zubats for the most part in the Clippers matchup, but otherwise it's been like the Warriors or the Wizards or just teams that are not going to test Jackson Hayes with either an elite big man or an elite rim pressure offense. So I think that's still a question mark. And again, I think he's largely passed the tests that have been in front of him. But I think in an ideal world, Jackson Hayes is a 12 to 18 minute a night backup and not a 24 to 28 minute a night starting center. In terms of the Lakers options, They have 15 players on a contract now because the trade, like that was another benefit of the Mark Williams trade, was they opened up an empty roster spot. So they're back to having 15 players, and they're 1.6 million under the second apron. So they got to be really careful about not adding salary and going over into the second apron, which has far more punitive restrictions and penalties than the first apron. So what they can do is they can waive a player. That player will still count against their cap sheet, but they can then sign someone else. And they could actually waive as many as 2 players and then sign 2 players, and they will still remain under the second apron. They will get close, but they will remain under it. So I think that is going to be the tentative plan moving forward. I think they're going to take some time, evaluate the free agent market, the buyout market. They also can sign guys to 10-day contracts once they waive a player or 2. I'm sure they'll be monitoring the 2-way guys. So a lot for them to figure out here. It is going to be a really vital decision with this roster, because they already needed likely a better backup, or at least a better alternative to Jackson Hayes, more of a defensive-minded, tough rebounding type, backing up Anthony Davis. Then once they traded Anthony Davis, they needed a starting center, and they went out and got him, and then the trade got rescinded due to him failing physicals. And so now they're scrambling, like, what type of bigs are out there? What type of bigs make sense? And really the options are underwhelming and just kind of like fringe rotation guys at best. It really, some of them are like fringe roster guys. So we will touch on it a little bit later, but I just wanted to talk about the fallout and all the impact from the Williams rescindment. Storyline number 4 for me is the Lakers are playing their best basketball of the season. And as I kind of hinted at, like, it's almost flown under the radar because of all the chaos, because you had these public quotes about the roster and upgrading it. Then you had AD's injury. Then you had the Luka trade, and the Mark Williams trade. It's like there's kind of been a lot of stuff going on that's distracted from the actual on-court results and performance, which has been the Lakers have been playing awesome basketball. They've been playing by far their best stretch of basketball this season. As I said at the top, they've won 11 of 13, including 5 in a row, and they're 9-1 in their past 10 games. Over the stretch of 13 games, they are 7th in offense, 2nd in defense, and 2nd in net rating. Over the past 10 games, they are 6th in offense, 2nd in defense, and 1st in net rating. So whether you go 13 games or 10 games, they've been a top 2 team in the league from a net rating perspective. They've been top 10 on both sides of the ball. Really, actually, they've been top 7 on both sides of the ball, which just shows you the level of basketball they've been playing. And it hasn't exactly been the easiest schedule as I pull it up here. That included the Grammy trip. That included AD missing a couple games. That included LeBron missing a game. Obviously, no Luka Doncic over this stretch. But looking at the last 10 games, it's beat Washington by 23, beat the Celtics by 21, beat the Warriors by 10, barely beat the Hornets. We'll look past that one. The Hornets had that big comeback, but beat the Wizards by 38, beat the Knicks by 16, beat the Clippers by 25, beat the Warriors by 8, and the Pacers by 7. And the Pacers won. That was without Luka and LeBron. Warriors won day of the trade deadline. So like they've just been like beating the Warriors twice, beating the Knicks, beating the Clippers, beating the Celtics. Like they have some impressive wins. Even Indiana, like they had won 7 of 10 and had been playing well on the road. So like the Lakers have just, they've weathered every storm thrown at them. They've shown a level of resiliency they didn't have earlier in the season. They've shown a level of seriousness and focus in two-way basketball. They've been able to play big. They've been able to play small. They've been able to play slow. They've been able to play fast. They've leaned on AD. They've leaned on LeBron. They've leaned on Austin. They've also leaned on the role players and Rui and DFS and Vando and Gabe and like everyone. Max, of course. Max played great before getting traded and has since played well in Dallas. I'm always going to be a big Max supporter and believer, but like the Lakers have just been playing incredible. And I think it's kind of gotten lost in a lot of the headlines and a lot of the drama and the transactions and stuff. But like they have quietly been a top 2 team in the league for going on almost a full month. And I don't think they're being talked about that way. But if we look out and say, like, if this team is going to make a conference finals, win a championship, even with the glaring hole in the middle, it's going to be because of the identity they've built over this past month. It's going to be because of the greatness of LeBron and Luka. It's going to be because of Austin Reeves taking a giant leap. It's going to be because of guys like Rui and DFS and Vando and Gabe buying into their roles. There's just been a lot to be encouraged by if you're the Lakers, if you're a Laker fan. And I think, again, it's kind of flown under the radar because of all of the off-court stuff. But on the court, that to me is the thing that I think is the most promising of all. And you add Luka Doncic into that. You add a top 2, at worst top 3 player, and just his ability to score and play make and just generate offense at the highest level. This is where, like, the ceiling really comes into for this group in terms of, like, I think they could go far in the playoffs. I do have some concerns with the rim protection and the defensive rebounding, but if they can somehow figure that out, or maybe the offense is great enough where it's not an issue, I think this is a team that has a chance to advance deep in the postseason and surprise some people and make a lot of noise. Storyline number 5 for me is LeBron has set the tone. And I think this has been arguably LeBron's best stretch of the season. And that's saying something because he's had a pretty great season. But looking at the last 10 games for LeBron, 27.1 points per game, 9.2 rebounds, 9.8 assists, 0.9 steals on 52, 34.8, and 79.2 shooting splits. So it's 52% from the floor, 34.8% on threes, 79.2% on free throws. And his net differential, which means the on-off court summary, looking at the Lakers' net rating when he's on the floor versus when he's off the floor, is a plus 2.9 net differential, meaning the Lakers are 2.9 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor compared to him off of it. And that is the 5th best mark on the team over that 10-game stretch, excluding the traded guys in AD and Max. Now, over the last 5 games, LeBron is at 31.3 points per game. So I pick 5 because that is post-AD injury and then post-AD trade. So basically the new normal of what the Lakers are going to look like moving forward. Of course, they're adding in Luka, so it's going to look much different. But no Anthony Davis, this is what that looks like. So 31.3 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, 10.0 assists, 1.0 steals on 54.2, 48, and 76.7 shooting splits. So almost 4 more points a game, almost a full rebound a game, basically the same number of assists and steals, but the field goal percentage has gone up by a couple of percentage points. The 3-point percentage has gone up by almost 13 percentage points. And 48% is ridiculous. It's not sustainable. And then the free throw percentage has dipped a little bit. But the biggest thing here is the Lakers' net differential, which, again, the on-off court, comparing the net rating with him on versus the net rating with him off, is plus 16.2, which is the best mark on the team. So the Lakers are 16.2 points per 100 possessions better with LeBron on the floor than off of it over the last 5 games. And that just shows you, like, he's just been incredible. They have looked incredible with him on the floor. I think he has really set the tone defensively. You are seeing him rotating quarter to quarter and rotating from being the low man up to the 3-point arc and vice versa, rotating from the 3-point line back to the rim. And he's playing passing lanes and he's contesting and he's boxing out and he's been rebounding really well. So I just think LeBron has set an incredible tone lately. There has been a remarkable level of emotional and mental buy-in. LeBron has been very engaged with the group, and I think he's really bought into the way that this team has been playing as they've been playing better. And I think he's been really bought in with the Luka trade. And I think you've seen even more of a pep in his step since that trade happened. And so there are a lot of factors that go into why the Lakers have been playing so well. But I think first and foremost, chief among them is LeBron James and the tone that he has set with his defense, with his energy, with his activity, with his leadership, with his mood. All that stuff has been great. And I think that's a big reason why the Lakers have had this significant turnaround to their season. Storyline number 6 for me is the return of Jarred Vanderbilt. And so I'm going to read you some numbers here. The Lakers are 7-0 with Jarred Vanderbilt in the lineup. And that's really all I have to say, because it's like, like go back to last season and this season. He's injured to start both seasons. Then last year he gets injured again in the Boston game. And there were the jokes and the memes, both from Laker fans, but also from NBA fans. And it was like, oh, just wait till Jarred Vanderbilt gets back. And like kind of mocking the Lakers and Laker fans about Jarred Vanderbilt's impact and kind of referencing almost go back to like the 2021-22 season when like Trevor Ariza was out and they had some of the veteran guys out. And it was like, okay, like wait till Jarred Vanderbilt gets back. And then Jarred Vanderbilt gets back and it's been a big difference, right? So the Lakers are 12.8 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor over the past 10 games, which is the second best mark on the team behind Dorian Finney-Smith. And remember with LeBron, that number was plus 2.9, which was the fifth best mark. Vando's all the way up at 12.8 over the 10 games. And he just adds an element of chaos and disruption on both sides of the ball. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Like he's had a couple of wild drives where he just drives into a thicket of arbs and players, and it's a turnover. He's also crashed the offensive glass and had several putback dunks and several timely putbacks. Defensively, he's switched and been disruptive and had pick sixes and played passing lanes well. He's also had some times where he's been a little too over aggressive and fouled, reaching in or on drives or whatever. But I think that level of aggression and assertiveness, that level of dog, for lack of a better term, has been much needed for this group. It has also been amplified by the presence of Dorian Finney-Smith. For those of you who are 90s kids, I'm sure you remember the Mighty Ducks and the Bash Brothers. That to me is Jarred Vanderbilt and Dorian Finney-Smith. They come in and they bash people on both sides of the ball, and they just give the Lakers an edge and an intensity and just this ferocity that I think this group desperately needs. So Vando's been a huge part of that. He can defend multiple positions. The Lakers have used him on big men. They've used him on guards. They've used him on wings. He's a monster rebounder. I think that's actually been the biggest way that he's helped this group has been his rebounding on both sides of the ball. And most of the lineups that he's been in have rebounded at a very high level. He's had some effectiveness as a playmaker out of the short roll, not as much as I was anticipating, but really as a dribble handoff guy. And the Lakers using him similar to the way the Warriors use Draymond, where if you're not going to guard him, if you're going to give him that much space, basically turns a dribble handoff into a screen, and he can quickly pitch the ball to LeBron or Austin or eventually Luka, and then quickly screen for them, and they get an open jumper or they have a driving lane. So I think he's been effective in that way. Most of his offense has come off of putbacks, which are valuable. It's offensive rebound, second chance. Also in transition, he's good at leaking out or helping create transition opportunities with his defense and stealing a ball or whatever. I still don't love him in the weak side corner, and that's where you see some of the issues with the Lakers offense when he's on the floor. It harkens back to the Darvin days when that was the primary way he was used until the final 2 weeks before he got injured in the Boston game. But I still think when he's in the weak side corner, you just see teams ignore him and put that defender in the paint or 1 foot out of the paint, and they can still close out to Vando in time where they're hoping he takes the three. I believe he's only made 1 3 on the season. And so him taking corner threes or trying to drive into packed paint is an advantage for the defense for the most part. So I still think the Lakers are better off using him around the elbows, the top of the arc, or if he is going to be in the corner, it's got to be like a temporary thing. And then he's got to be cutting or in the dunker spot or whatever. But that's the one thing I think they still have to figure out is too much corner usage, in my opinion, for Vando. I also think he's arguably bid best as a small ball center in the Lakers small units. And when they've, I thought, especially the Knicks game was the best example. They just looked great with him out there, putting Dorian Finney-Smith on Karl Anthony Towns and then having Vando roam and just wreak havoc as a helper and a roamer. That I think could end up being the Lakers' identity long term, especially if there's certain matchups where Jackson Hayes is played off the floor. They just might have to lean into being a smaller team, and I think Vando is going to be a critical part of that identity. And just looking at those lineups, with Vando at center, it's a relatively small sample size, 73 possessions, but the Lakers have outscored opponents by 23.5 points per 100 possession. So they're not even quite at the 100 possession mark. It's been a small sample size, but in those doses of Vando at the 5, the Lakers have played really, really well. And as I said, those lineups have rebounded really well, and interestingly have played better offensively than defensively. Teams have really struggled to match up with the Lakers' small units. But Vando being back, and he's done all this, mind you, on a minutes restriction. He's basically not played more than 20 minutes in a game since coming back. So imagine if he can get up to 24, 26, 28 minutes, that's a huge piece for the Lakers. Storyline number 7 is, as things stand, the center rotation moving forward is going to be Jackson Hayes plus small ball. And I'm most intrigued by the small ball part, but let's touch on Jackson Hayes, because Jackson Hayes has been playing better overall, especially since AD got injured and he became the starting center over the past 5 games. So over this stretch of 10 games, which is the stretch that we're covering, obviously, Jackson is averaging 6.6 points, 5.0 rebounds, shooting 77.1% from the floor, averaging 1.5 blocks, 0.7 steals. And the one thing with him has been the lineup data. And this is partly because of how dominant a good AD has been or had been over the stretch, because the Lakers, the on-off, the net differential with Jackson has been minus 12.4 points per 100 possessions. So the Lakers have been worse over this stretch of 10 games by 12.4 points per 100 possessions with Jackson on. They've actually technically been still a positive. Like I think the net rating with him on is like a +7 or +8. But with him off, it's been like a +20. So it's been a pretty significant difference, Jackson on versus Jackson off. Now, looking at him as a starter the last 5 games, he's averaging 8.0 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, shooting 77.3%, averaging 1.8 blocks, 1.0 steals, and the net differential has gone down to minus 1.4 points per 100 possession. So a much more manageable number, we'll say, a much better number. And so still a slight negative. Lakers have been better going smaller, even with Jackson, during the stretch, but scoring's been better, rebounding's been better, shot blocking's been better, field goal percentage has basically been the same. I say all that to say, like, with Jackson, I think the focus has been better. I think the awareness has been better. The decision making, I think he's been rebounding the ball better. He's been protecting the rim better. He's obviously been excelling offensively with LeBron and Austin, and even some of the other guys finding him with dump off passes and lobs, getting out in transition, putback dunks, just putbacks in general. Like, I think this has been arguably the best stretch of Jackson as a Laker, or at least the best stretch of Jackson as a Laker this season. I think he had a pretty strong close to last season as the primary backup center. So some of his best basketball as a Laker has certainly been these last 5 games, I would say, in particular. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, Jackson Hayes is on a minimum contract for a reason. He is more of a backup than a starter, and I think he's going to continue to start at the center spot. But I view him as more of like even as the starting center for this team, more of just a placeholder, more of like a 20, 22, maybe 24 minute a night guy. And then come playoff time, maybe that gets down into like the maybe 18 to 20 range. And then the rest of the time you're just going small, because now to transition to the small ball stuff, like the small ball lineups have really crushed it for the Lakers. And this is a divergence from earlier in the season, and not even that far off from, more recently, where the small ball lineups were not performing well. But 2 critical pieces that have been added to these small ball lineups have been Dorian Finney-Smith and Jarred Vanderbilt. So looking at the Lakers and looking at the last 5 games, LeBron and Vando have been right there at the top in terms of plus minus and on off. So those 2 have been really the driving forces, with LeBron obviously being LeBron and Vando with his defense and energy and rebounding. As I mentioned in the Vando section, Vando at center, Lakers are plus 23.5 points per 100 possessions in 73 possessions. Those lineups, looking at the actual lineup performance, They've been great offensively and dominant on the offensive glass, in particular because of Vando. They've actually not defended that well. They've been below average defensively and not really been forcing turnovers or grabbing a lot of defensive rebounds. They've been giving up a lot of offensive rebounds. So that's Vando at the 5. And now with DFS in these small ball lineups, so looking at DFS being somewhere in the front court with no center on the court, no Jackson, no AD, no Trey Jemison, no Christian Coloco, no Armel Traore. So any lineup configuration, often been Dorian, LeBron, and Rui, but more recently with Vando in the mix. The Lakers in those stretches have a plus 20.7 net differential. They're outscoring opponents by 20.7 points per 100 possessions in 210 possessions. And they have a 131.9 offensive rating, which is an elite mark, and a 111.2 defensive rating, which is a really good mark. So they've been really good on both sides of the ball with DFS in these small ball lineups. And offensively, they're taking care of the ball, they're getting to the free throw line, and they're shooting really well. Defensively, they're not forcing a lot of turnovers, which continues to be a general issue for this Lakers group. And they have struggled on the glass on both sides. They're not offensive rebounding a lot, and they're not defensive rebounding well. So those are the pros and cons. But I think DFS and Vando, because of their versatility on both sides of the ball, and particularly because of their multi-positional defense, as I said, the intensity, just the motor that they play with, and the edge that they play with, the dog, as I said, like that has made a difference in these small ball lineups. And I do wonder long term, when we look at, we'll see what happens with the potential center market in the buyout market or free agency or whatever. But I doubt the Lakers find a truly impact player, among the options. So I think longer term, this is probably going to be a group that has to lean into small ball at the highest levels. And it's going to be figuring out the particular matchups against a particular team. And then it being some combination of, in the front court, LeBron, DFS, Vando, and Rui, 3 of those 4. And then in the back court, Luka, Austin, and Gabe. And I think it will be Luka, LeBron. I'm going to go out on a limb and say those 2 guys are going to often close. I do expect Austin to also be often in the closing group, unless he's struggling offensively in a matchup and getting targeted defensively. But I think at this point, he's above at least the former. We'll see about the latter, especially with how the rest of the group looks. But I suspect it'll be a lot of lineups with LeBron, Luka, and Austin. And then the other 2 spots will be some combination of DFS, Vando, Rui, and Gabe. I would probably prioritize them in that order, with DFS being the one closest to being the 4th lock, Vando probably number 5, Rui number 6 if you need a little bit more offense, and then Gabe just because of the size at number 7, and then Jackson at number 8. And that's your top 8 in your rotation. But I think in pivotal moments, this group is going to have to lean into smaller lineups and really lean into DFS and Vando as big men. The lineup I'm most interested in is Vando, DFS, LeBron, Luka, and Austin. I think you got offense, you got defense, you got a nice 2-way balance, and I think that group is going to be really, really good once Luka makes his debut. The 8th storyline is the 15th roster spot. So I've touched on it a little bit, but the Lakers are at currently 15 players on the roster. They need to waive at least one player, if not a couple. And their free agency needs have shifted from a shooting guard prior or post Mark Williams trade, prior to Mark Williams trade being rescinded. They needed a shooting guard at that point. Now they're back to needing a center, which they desperately need. And to do so, again, they're going to need to have to waive a player, if not a couple. I think it should be Christian Wood, based on him being still injured and there not being a recent medical update. If we get an update here soon, and he's maybe going to be back within the next couple weeks, that changes my perspective and maybe waive someone else. But I think him just not being available all season, and even if he does come back, he'll probably be on a minutes restriction, and there could be some uncertainty as to his health the rest of the way. Like, I think that's the one guy you probably have to move on from. And then looking at the other candidates, it would be Cam Reddish, Markieff Morris, and Shake Milton. I would say Markieff Morris is the worst of the 3. However, he has a relationship with LeBron. He has a relationship with Luka. I wonder if they want to just keep him in like that Udonis Haslem role as the vet at the end of the bench who is a leader and also a guy that no one wants to mess with, both on the team and on the opposing team. And I just wonder if Markieff Morris, from a culture perspective and being a vet and an OG, like maybe he stays on the roster. And again, also makes things a little bit more comfortable for Luka. Then it comes down to Cam Reddish or Shake Milton. And I mean, JJ's preferred to play Shake more recently. So that would indicate, and they traded Cam. So that would indicate maybe he's the guy. I think it should be Christian Wood. And then if there's a second one, you can make a case for any of the other three. But at most, the Lakers can waive two minimum players who do not have salary past this season and then sign a couple of centers. In my opinion, it needs to be a defensive center. If you're just going out and signing an offensive center, like sure, you can make the case from a talent perspective. There are maybe some offensive centers that make the most sense just because they have the most talent or the most skill. And you literally need like a second center just in case Jackson Hayes gets injured or in foul trouble. Like you don't want to go small ball for 48 minutes, although maybe JJ would like that. I don't know. So I think it needs to be a defensive minded center. I think that's like the one requirement that it needs to be the skill that they prioritize with this player. Some of the available names right now include Daniel Tice, though like that's my favorite of the current available options, though it seems like he's likely going back to Europe. Maybe the Lakers can convince him otherwise. Mo Bamba, who's obviously a former Laker, former lottery pick. I'm not as high on Mo Bamba and his fit just because the Clippers desperately needed a backup center behind Zubats, and they just benched Mo Bamba and prioritized Drew Eubanks, who I don't think is like, I think he's been slightly underrated as a backup center, but I don't think he's that good. And if you're picking Drew Eubanks over Mo Bamba, I know there's some financial components to that as well, but like, it's just a little bit of a red flag for me of why does no one hold on to Mo Bamba, including the Lakers. And then there's also Damian Jones, who the Lakers have also already had and was rather underwhelming. There's been some speculation that maybe a Larry Nance or Kelly Olynyk could become available. I would be interested in either one of those guys. I think Larry Nance is by far the best player that I just mentioned. And like, if you get Larry Nance, you get Larry Nance, also a former Laker. But it's the lack of clarity. I mean, Chris Boucher is another name that has been thrown out there. But until those guys are available, you just don't know. And each guy has their own flaws. So I would try to get Tice. I'm okay with Bamba. He doesn't really move me much, but like, it's just the 7-foot rim protector, I guess. A bit of a streaky shooter. He's slight, so he can be pushed around a bit in the paint. But maybe that's the best you can do. It is better than just having Christian Wood sitting on the bench in a sweatsuit and not playing. And another option for the Lakers could also be converting Christian Koloko or Trey Jemison from a two-way contract to the official roster. So between the two, I prefer Koloko. I think he's played really well. Not quite sure. It seems like he's fallen out of favor with JJ a little bit more recently, and they've been favoring Jemison. I do think Jemison has played well, and he's got the physical profile to deal with some of the bigger bigs. But I think from a finishing perspective, a skill perspective, he's a bit raw offensively. I like Koloko's ability to be a lob threat. I also like Koloko's rim protection. And I think he's had some pretty good performances for the Lakers this season in limited minutes. So I would lean Christian Koloko. I mean, I think you could actually argue Christian Koloko is just the best of the guys that are actually available. Like, is Damian Jones better than Christian Koloko? Is Daniel Tice? Is Mo Bamba? Like, you could sell me on Koloko. He's had some solid performances this year. So Lakers have some options. They're rather underwhelming overall. I would probably go the route of waiving two guys and taking two cracks at it. I would probably go Koloko and then more of a veteran guy, and then keep Trey Jemison as a two-way guy. And then maybe you could bring back Quincy Oliveri as a two-way guy or someone else. But that would be the way I would approach it. But they got to do something, and they got to do it quickly. I believe that the playoff deadline to add guys, at least in the buyout market, is, I believe, March 1st. So that they got about 3 weeks here to decide on what they want to do. But yeah, I mean, they need a big bed, and they need a big bed ASAP. Storyline number 9 for me is going to be JJ Redick really coming into his own as a coach. And I think the one person who has not gotten enough credit during this entire stretch has been JJ, and then obviously by extension his coaching staff. But I think JJ has pushed a lot of the right buttons with this group. I think for one, he got the buy-in from the group after at a couple points this season, it looked like they were teetering on not fully buying in. Like I go back to that Minnesota and Miami losses back to back. I go back to even earlier in the year with the Houston and Dallas losses, and then the San Antonio loss, and like then games were postponed with the fires, and it was just like it felt like the Lakers season was teetering in the balance, so to speak. And I think JJ has done a really good job of rallying the group after both of those low points. And it seems like this has just been the best vibes around the team, basically outside of the first 3 games of the season when they started 3-0 and everything was kumbaya. They had a good start, obviously 10-4, but then since then, it's been more of a 500 team until this stretch, and I think just everything's been great. Guys are glowingly speaking about the game plan and the adjustments from JJ and the coaching staff, and like he and the players I think have just been in sync and fully bought in. And he's talked about the defensive improvement largely coming from the coaching staff having a clear and effective game plan, but the players also buying in and executing that game plan. And it's kind of a two-way street there where the coaching staff has to do their preparation and make sure they know what they're talking about and are on point with their suggestions and their strategy. But they also have to get the buy-in from the players, and the players have to be willing to trust them and execute it. And it just feels like the vibes with this group are back to where they were at the beginning of the season, if not even better, because of how much sustained winning they've had recently. And I think a big part of that has been JJ. And looking at his defensive game plans against the Celtics, against the Knicks, against the Clippers, against the Warriors, like I think he's pushed all the right buttons in those matchups with like particular defensive matchups, with mixing in some zone, with being selective with the switching. In the Knicks game, for example, going smaller, trapping Karl Anthony Towns and causing chaos, playing off of Josh Hart and daring him to be a shooter. In the Clippers game, I thought they did a really nice job against Zubats and really neutered him. He had basically half the production he had in the previous matchup, and that was with Anthony Davis on the floor in the previous matchup. So I just think JJ and the coaching staff have done a really stellar job over the past like a month or so, especially coming out of what I have dubbed the Texas Massacre, when they lost to all 3 Texas teams convincingly, or some like Houston was more the first half, but rather convincingly. 2 of the games were 2 of the losses were by like 20 plus. But the only thing I will still nitpick, and I will continue to say this until it changes. I still think DFS needs to start over Rui. I think especially with inserting Luka into the starting lineup and likely starting Luka and Austin together, you really need to prioritize defense with that 5th spot. In Jackson, LeBron, Austin, Luka, that's not the most imposing defensive quartet. And I think you need a better defender in there. Vando's still on a minutes restriction. I also don't love Vando and Jackson together due to the spacing concerns. So put in Dorian, the 40% 3-point shooter who gives you an edge. He's been a lineup data on-off beast for your group. He's been a leader for your group. And also he has a lot of familiarity and reps and experience with Luka. Luka loves him. I just think it makes all the sense in the world. Start Dorian, move Rui to the bench, make him more of a 6-man scorer, and put him in some lineups where he could be featured a little bit more offensively. And also you can hide some of his defense. I think the defense has been largely better from Rui, especially playing some center or 4/5 in certain smaller lineups. But he's not a wing stopper. And if Rui's supposed to be the best defender in the lineup, that's a problem. And LeBron's been better, but you don't want to make LeBron a wing stopper. So I think the Lakers are in a tricky spot there. I know JJ loves Rui. I know Rui likes starting. And so I think that they're kind of trying to weigh everything. Outside of that, I think the lineups, the rotation have been on point. The game plan's been on point. The results have been on point. And it just feels like the Lakers are really hitting their stride at the right time. And then the 10th and final storyline is the road ahead. So I'm going to be talking about the strength of schedule. As things stand, the Lakers have the 9th hardest remaining strength of schedule, according to Tankathon. So that's factoring in opponent win percentage. It's basically just looking at like taking all the opponents that you have remaining, combining their win percentage, and then ranking it. So Lakers have one of the harder schedules remaining in the West, and overall, they still face OKC twice, Boston once, Denver 3 times, New York once, Memphis once, and Houston twice. So those are some, and a lot of those games are between late February and late March. They have a brutal 1 month stretch there where they play Denver 3 times. OKC's after that stretch, but Boston's in there. I didn't even mention Milwaukee. They still have to play Milwaukee twice. That's in there. I think there might be a Houston game in there, a Memphis game in there. They got a tough stretch coming up here, especially at the end of the month. And of note, in comparison with other teams in the West, Phoenix, Memphis, Denver, and the Clippers all have tougher schedules. So the Lakers have, I believe, the 5th toughest remaining schedule in the West, and they're ahead of Phoenix, they're ahead of the Clippers, and they're behind Denver and Memphis in the standings. So that gives them some wiggle room there. However, looking at notable West teams that have easier schedules, OKC, Golden State, Houston, and Dallas all have easier schedules. OKC seems to be a lock for the 1 seed. Golden State, maybe they can make a push with Jimmy Butler on the roster now. Houston is a notable one that is going to be battling the Lakers for a top 5 seed. And Dallas could have been a notable one, but with AD looking like he might miss a month and maybe even longer, depending on if he has surgery or not, Dallas could be potentially dropping out of that mix. But just wanted to throw that out there of, it's not so much a storyline now. The Lakers withstood this recent stretch of the Grammy trip and some notable matchups at home against the Celtics and the Warriors and whatnot. But the schedule is about to get much tougher. They're going to have a little bit, if they could get Luka back on Monday, they will have a couple games against the Jazz. They come out of it with a back-to-back against the Hornets and the Blazers. So that's a chance to go 4-0, rack up some wins with Luka, get your flow, your continuity going with the new group, the new makeup, and then you go at Denver, and that's what kicks off the rest of this stretch. So halfway through the next 10-game period is when this stretch really starts. But I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's going to be a big storyline moving forward, particularly in late February. And most of these we're looking back at 9 of the 10. We're looking back at the past 10 games and then looking a little bit forward. This is one that was just looking forward because I think it's notable that they're about to enter a much tougher portion of their schedule. But that will do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those who are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back Monday night after Lakers Jazz. We'll see if Luka makes his debut. I think it's more likely than not going to happen, but if not, it'll happen Wednesday. I'll be covering both games, so I will be covering Luka's debut whenever it happens, and I will talk to you then.